The sun over North Africa is not a companion. It is an enemy. May 1943. The Libyan desert stretches endlessly in every direction, a sea of sand and stone that shimmers under heat so intense it bends light itself. Mirages dance on the horizon, phantom lakes that vanish as you approach, cruel jokes in a land where water means survival. The temperature inside the cockpit of a Curtiss P-40 Warhawk reaches 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Metal burns bare skin. Sweat soaks through flight suits within minutes, and the smell of gasoline, oil, and human exhaustion fills the cramped space where young men sit, waiting for orders that could be their last. Captain Jake Rattler Morrison sits in the shadow of his aircraft, a battered Warhawk with a shark-mouth grin painted across its nose, a tradition borrowed from the Flying Tigers of China, now adopted by the American pilots of the 57th Fighter Group. The paint is chipped and faded, scarred by shrapnel and sandblasted by weeks of operations in this godforsaken corner of the world. Rattler's hands shake slightly as he lights a cigarette, though not from fear. It's the heat. Always the heat. And the exhaustion. They've flown 3 missions already today, and the sun hasn't even reached its peak. Around him, the makeshift airfield is a study in organized chaos. Ground crews swarm over aircraft like ants on a carcass, patching bullet holes, replacing blown tires, refueling from jerry cans hauled across hundreds of miles of desert. There are no runways here, just a flat stretch of hardpan scraped clear of the worst rocks, marked by oil drums at either end. When a plane lands, it raises a dust cloud visible for miles, a beacon to any Luftwaffe reconnaissance aircraft prowling the skies. But they have no choice. This is war in the desert, improvised, desperate, and unforgiving. Rattler watches as a young British pilot, couldn't be more than 20, climbs down from a Hawker Hurricane, his face pale beneath layers of grime and sunburn. The kid's hands tremble as he removes his leather helmet, and his eyes have that 1,000-yard stare Rattler has seen too many times. The Hurricane's fuselage is stitched with bullet holes. The kid is lucky to be alive. First time seeing a 109 up close? Rattler asks, not unkindly. The British pilot nods, unable to speak. Gets easier, Rattler lies. It doesn't get easier. It never gets easier. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 is faster, climbs better, and in the hands of an experienced Luftwaffe pilot, it's a killing machine. The German pilots over North Africa aren't the green replacements fighting over Europe anymore. These are veterans, men who've survived years of combat, who know every trick, every angle, every split-second advantage that separates life from death at 20,000 feet. The P-40 Warhawk, for all its shark-toothed aggression, is outclassed in almost every measurable way. It can't climb with a 109. It can't turn with a 109. In a straight fight, one-on-one, the smart money is on the German. But wars aren't won by specifications on paper. They're won by men who refuse to accept the math, who find ways to win even when the odds say they shouldn't. Rattler crushes out his cigarette and stands, squinting against the brutal glare. Across the airfield, he sees his squadron leader, Major Tom "Sandstorm" Kellerman, emerging from the operations tent, a canvas shelter that provides exactly zero relief from the heat but at least keeps the sand out of the maps and radios. Kellerman is tall, lean, with a face carved from the same unforgiving stone as the desert around them. He's 32, ancient by fighter pilot standards, and he's been flying combat since the first American aircraft arrived in North Africa 6 months ago. Kellerman waves Rattler over, and the captain feels his stomach tighten. Another mission. Always another mission. The Allied advance is stalling against Axis positions near the coast, and the Luftwaffe has air superiority over key sectors. German Stukas, the infamous Junkers Ju-87 dive bombers, have been hammering Allied armor and supply columns with near impunity, their screaming sirens as much a psychological weapon as the 500-kilogram bombs they carry. Allied ground commanders are screaming for air cover, and the fighters are all that stand between victory and catastrophe. "We've got a job," Kellerman says without preamble. His voice is rough, dried out by sand and cigarettes. Intelligence says a formation of Stukas is inbound to hit our forward positions near Bur Hakim. 12 bombers, maybe more. Escorted by 109s, we don't know how many. Rattler calculates silently. 12 Stukas. That means at least 6 escort fighters, probably more. The Germans learned their lesson early in the war. Unescorted bombers are target practice. The 109s will be flying high cover, waiting to pounce on any Allied fighters that try to intercept. What's our strength? Rattler asks. 8 Warhawks. 4 Hurricanes from 260 Squadron. Kellerman's expression doesn't change, but Rattler can read the subtext. They're outnumbered, outgunned, and the heat has already sapped half their strength before they even leave the ground. When do we scramble? 10 minutes. Get your boys ready. Rattler nods and turns toward his aircraft. Around him, other pilots are already moving, checking their gear, climbing into cockpits. There's no bravado now, no jokes or backslapping. This is the moment when the reality settles in. Some of them won't be coming back. Statistics are clear and merciless. Fighter pilots in North Africa have an average life expectancy measured in weeks, not months. Every takeoff could be the last. He reaches his Warhawk and runs his hand along the hot metal of the fuselage, a superstitious ritual he's performed before every mission. The aircraft is scarred but functional, patched together by mechanics who work miracles with spare parts scavenged from wrecks. The 6.50 caliber machine guns in the wings are loaded and ready. The single-stage supercharger on the Allison V-1710 engine wheezes and coughs but still produces 1,150 horsepower, enough to get him into the fight, even if it won't win him any races. He climbs into the cockpit, the metal seat scorching even through his flight suit. The instrument panel is a forest of dials and gauges, most of them reading temperatures that make mechanics wince. He straps in, connects his oxygen mask, and runs through the pre-flight checklist from memory. Behind him, ground crew pull the wheel chocks. The moment is coming. Kellerman's Warhawk roars to life first, the big radial engine coughing black smoke before settling into a throaty rumble. One by one, the other aircraft follow suit. The noise is deafening, 12 fighters at full throttle, their propellers churning the superheated air into hurricanes of dust and fury. Rattler closes the canopy and advances the throttle. The Warhawk lurches forward, bouncing over the rough ground, gaining speed. The oil drums marking the runway flash past. The tail comes up. The wheels leave the earth, and suddenly he's climbing into the endless blue, leaving behind the dust and heat for the thin, cold air where men fight and die in silence. Below, the desert stretches away in all directions, beautiful and terrible in its vastness. Somewhere out there, the Luftwaffe is coming, and the Desert Hawks are rising to meet them. At 8,000 feet, the heat is still oppressive, but at least the air is breathable. Rattler Morrison levels out his Warhawk and glances left and right, confirming his wingmen are in position. Lieutenant Danny Cowboy Hayes flies off his right wing, close enough that Rattler can see the younger pilot's face behind the curved plexiglass canopy. Focused, intense, but with that edge of fear that never quite goes away. On his left, Lieutenant Marcus Ghost Patterson holds formation with the smooth precision of someone who's done this 100 times before. Ghost is on his second tour, one of the few who survived long enough to be called a veteran. The radio crackles in Rattler's headset, Kellerman's voice cutting through the static, Desert Hawk leader to all flights. Climb to Angels 12. Maintain combat spread. Eyes sharp, 109s could be anywhere. Angels 12. 12,000 feet. The altitude where the air starts getting thin, where the Warhawk's engine begins to strain against the limits of its supercharger. The Messerschmitt 109, by contrast, thrives up here. Its fuel-injected Daimler-Benz engine doesn't cough and sputter when you throw the stick around. Its rate of climb is nearly double that of the P-40. In a dogfight at this altitude, the Germans have every advantage. But the Americans have learned to adapt. They've learned that the P-40, while slower in a climb, is nearly indestructible in a dive. They've learned to use altitude and surprise, to never get drawn into a turning fight where the 109's maneuverability can be brought to bear. They've learned to fight in pairs, to cover each other, to never fly alone. These lessons have been written in blood, the blood of pilots who didn't learn fast enough. The formation climbs in silence, 12 aircraft strung out across 2 miles of sky. The 4 British Hurricanes from 260 Squadron fly slightly behind and above, their Rolls-Royce Merlin engines producing a distinctive note that sets them apart from the American aircraft. The Hurricane is older, slower, but rugged as hell. The Brits have been fighting since 1940, and their pilots have a weariness about them that goes beyond physical exhaustion. Rattler checks his gauges compulsively. Fuel, 3/4 full. Oil pressure, nominal. Engine temperature, hot but not critical. Oxygen, flowing. Guns, armed. The 6.50 caliber Brownings carry about 30 seconds of sustained fire, enough for 2 or 3 good bursts if he's disciplined. After that, he's flying an expensive and very vulnerable target. Contacts, 11 o'clock low. The voice on the radio is sharp, urgent. Flight Officer Davies, one of the Hurricane pilots. Count 12, no, 15 aircraft. Look like Stukas. Rattler's eyes snap to the left, scanning the desert below. At first, he sees nothing but the endless tan expanse. Then, movement, dark specks against the sand, flying in formation. Even from 3 miles up, the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka is unmistakable. The inverted gull wings, the fixed landing gear with its distinctive spatted wheels, the dive brakes that allow the aircraft to drop nearly vertically onto its target. It's an ugly airplane, slow and vulnerable, but in a dive with a skilled pilot at the controls, it's terrifyingly accurate. "I've got them," Kellerman confirms. "And I've got their escort." High cover at 3 o'clock, Angels 15. Count 6, no, 8 109s. There it is. The equation that will determine whether they live or die. 15 Stukas, 8 Messerschmitts against 12 Allied fighters. The math isn't terrible, but math doesn't account for pilot skill, altitude advantage, or the fact that the 109s are specifically built to do one thing: kill other fighters. Desert Hawk leader to all flights, Kellerman's voice is calm, almost conversational. "We split the formation. Rattler, take your flight and ghosts down on the bombers. Fast attack 1 pass, then get out. Don't get drawn into a dogfight. The rest of us will keep the 109s busy. On my mark, 3, 2, 1, mark." The formation explodes apart. Rattler rolls his Warhawk inverted and pulls into a steep dive, the desert rushing up to meet him. Behind him, Cowboy and Ghost follow, along with 3 other Warhawks. The dive is both exhilarating and terrifying, airspeed building rapidly, 250 knots, 280, 300, the wings shaking as they approach the structural limits of the aircraft. The wind screams past the canopy, and Rattler's body is pressed back into his seat by the G-forces. Below, the Stukas continue toward their target, unaware or unconcerned by the American fighters plummeting toward them. Rattler can see details now: the black crosses on their wings, the bomb load slung beneath each fuselage, the rear gunners in their exposed positions. Those gunners will start firing the moment the P-40s come into range. 7.92 mm machine guns that can shred an engine or kill a pilot with a lucky burst. "Pick your targets," Rattler shouts into his radio. Short bursts, then break off. He lines up on a Stuka near the rear of the formation, the gun sight pipper settling on the bomber's greenhouse canopy. At 500 yards, he squeezes the trigger. The P-40 shudders as all 6 machine guns open up, a stream of tracer fire reaching out across the gap. He walks the rounds forward, sees them spark and tear into the Stuka's wing root. Then the rear gunner opens fire, and suddenly the sky around Rattler's canopy is full of tracers, bright lines of death crisscrossing his path. He brakes hard left, the Warhawk groaning under the strain, and the Stuka flashes past, trailing smoke. Hit! I got a hit! Cowboy's voice is high with adrenaline. Rattler cranes his neck, searching for threats. Where are the 109s? They should be diving on the American fighters by now, and when they come, brake right! Brake right! Ghost's voice, screaming. Rattler throws the stick over instinctively, and a Messerschmitt 109 rips through the space where he was a half-second earlier, its cannon fire chewing through empty air. The German is fast, incredibly fast, painted in desert camouflage with a yellow nose that identifies it as a fighter from Jägerschwader 27, one of the Luftwaffe's elite units. The pilot pulls up sharply, already maneuvering for another pass. No time to think. Rattler slams the throttle forward and dives again, using the P-40's superior dive speed to open the gap. Behind him, he can hear the chaos of the dogfight unfolding. The rattle of machine guns, the roar of engines, voices shouting warnings and confirmations over the radio. Stuka down! Stuka down! 109 on my tail! Can't shake him! I'm hit! I'm hit! Oil pressure dropping. Rattler levels out at 5,000 feet and pulls hard on the stick, climbing back toward the fight. His heart hammers in his chest, and his flight suit is soaked with sweat. He searches the sky, aircraft everywhere, a swirling furball of metal and tracer fire. A hurricane spirals past, one wing on fire, the pilot desperately trying to control the descent. A Stuka explodes in midair, hit by a cannon shell, its fragments tumbling toward the desert floor. And then he sees it, two 109s, working in perfect coordination, boxing in one of the American Warhawks. He recognizes the tail number. It's Cowboy. The kid is turning hard, trying to shake the Germans, but they're hurting him, forcing him into a position where he can't maneuver. In seconds, they'll have a clean shot. Rattler doesn't hesitate. He rolls the P-40 onto its back and dives toward the Germans, ignoring the screaming voice in his head that tells him this is suicide. The airspeed builds, 320 knots, 340, the controls going stiff, the whole aircraft vibrating like it's about to shake apart. The lead 109 doesn't see him coming until it's too late. Rattler opens fire at 300 yards, a long burst that tears into the German's tail section. The Messerschmitt breaks off, trailing smoke, and the second 109 peels away to cover his wingman. "Get out of here, Cowboy!" Rattler shouts. But the Germans aren't done. The second 109 swings around, and suddenly Rattler is the one being hunted. The German pilot is good, very good. He anticipates every move, stays on Rattler's tail through a series of violent turns that drain the American's airspeed and leave him vulnerable. Rattler can see the muzzle flashes from the 109's nose-mounted cannon, can feel the impacts as rounds punch through his fuselage. The cockpit fills with the smell of cordite and burning insulation. A warning light flares on his instrument panel, oil pressure dropping rapidly. He's in trouble. Real trouble. And the desert is waiting below, patient and hungry. The Allison engine coughs, and Rattler Morrison knows he's seconds from dying. Oil pressure is gone, the gauge needle buried in the red. The Messerschmitt 109 behind him isn't letting up, its 20mm cannon sending shells through his Warhawk's airframe with methodical precision. Each impact sounds like a hammer striking an anvil, metal tearing, systems failing. The stick is sluggish in his hands, and when he tries to bank left, the aircraft responds with a sickening delay that tells him the control cables are damaged. 3,000 feet. If the engine seizes, he'll have maybe 30 seconds to bail out before the P-40 becomes a coffin tumbling toward the sand. "Rattler, I see you." Ghost's voice cuts through the radio static. "Hold on, I'm coming in." Rattler risks a glance over his shoulder. The 109 is right there, close enough that he can see the pilot's leather helmet, the dark goggles, the focused expression of a predator closing for the kill. The German is flying textbook tactics, staying just outside the P-40's cone of fire, positioning for a killing shot that will punch through the engine block and into the cockpit. Then Ghost's Warhawk drops out of the sun like a hawk on a rabbit. The burst is short, disciplined, perfect. 50 caliber rounds walk up the 109's fuselage from tail to cockpit, and the German fighter shudders, pieces flying off the wings and cowling. The Messerschmitt breaks hard right, trailing smoke, and Ghost follows, hammering another burst into the enemy aircraft. The 109's canopy explodes in a shower of plexiglass, and the aircraft rolls over, beginning its death spiral toward the desert floor. "You're clear," Ghost shouts. "Get that bird down. You're on fire." Fire. The word hits Rattler like a punch. He cranes his neck and sees it, orange flames licking back from the engine cowling, oil-fed and hungry. The cockpit temperature is rising fast, and smoke is starting to seep through the instrument panel. He has minutes, maybe less. "I'm heading for the deck," Rattler manages, his voice tight. "Cover me if any 109s follow. On your 6. Go." Rattler points the nose down and lets gravity do the work. The Warhawk descends rapidly, the burning engine screaming its death song. Below, the desert is a flat canvas of tan and brown, broken only by patches of darker rock and the occasional dried wadi. He scans for anything flat enough to put the aircraft down. A crash landing is his only option now. Around him, the battle continues to rage. He can see dogfights unfolding at different altitudes, aircraft wheeling and diving, tracer fire stitching patterns across the sky. A Stuka is falling in flames, tumbling end over end. A hurricane is limping eastward, trailing smoke but still flying. The radio is a chaos of voices, warnings, confirmations, screams. Desert Hawk 3 is down. "I saw the chute. I'm Winchester, out of ammo. Breaking off. 2 Stukas still inbound to target. Someone intercept." Kellerman's voice cuts through the chaos, calm and authoritative. "All Desert Hawks, this is leader. If you're Winchester or damaged, head for home. Everyone else, stay on the bombers. We stop them here or our boys on the ground die." Rattler is at 1,500 feet when the engine seizes completely. The propeller freezes mid-rotation, and the sudden silence is deafening. No more roar, no more vibration, just the whistle of wind over the wings and the crackling of flames eating through the cowling. He has seconds to decide. Bail out or try to land. Bailing out means floating down in a parachute, visible for miles, landing in hostile territory with no water, no radio, and German patrols everywhere. Landing means controlling a burning aircraft with damaged controls and trying to put it down on rough terrain at 90 miles per hour. He chooses the landing. "Ghost, I'm going in." "Tell Kellerman." He doesn't finish the sentence. "What is there to say?" "You're going to make it, Rattler. I'll circle and mark your position for search and rescue." Rattler lines up on what looks like a relatively flat section of desert floor, a hardpan area free of major rocks. He lowers the flaps manually, the hydraulics are shot, and the Warhawk slows, dropping toward the earth. At 500 feet, the fire breaks through the firewall, and flames start crawling along the sides of the cockpit. The heat is unbearable. 300 feet. He can see individual rocks now, shadows and textures. Too fast. He's coming in too fast. 200 feet. He pulls the nose up slightly, trying to bleed off airspeed, but the damaged controls barely respond. 100 feet. The Warhawk hits the desert at 95 miles per hour. The impact is catastrophic. The landing gear, never designed for this kind of abuse, collapses instantly. The propeller blades dig into the sand, and the entire aircraft flips forward, momentum carrying it into a violent cartwheel. Metal screams, the canopy shatters, and Rattler is slammed against his restraints with crushing force. The world becomes a spinning chaos of sand, fire, and twisted metal. The Warhawk tumbles once, twice, 3 times, each impact shedding pieces of wing and fuselage, before finally grinding to a halt on its back. Rattler hangs upside down in his straps, dazed, ears ringing, tasting blood. The fire is everywhere now, flames spreading across the inverted aircraft, consuming fuel and oil and anything else that will burn. He can't breathe, the smoke is too thick. His hands fumble with the harness release, fingers numb and clumsy. Get out. Get out now. The release catches, and he falls onto the collapsed canopy, broken plexiglass cutting through his flight suit. He scrambles, half crawling, half dragging himself through the shattered opening. The heat is incredible, searing exposed skin, singeing hair. He clears the wreckage just as the fuel tank ruptures, and the fireball lifts him off his feet, throwing him 10 yards across the sand. He lies there, gasping, watching his Warhawk burn. The shark-mouth grin is gone, consumed by flames. The tail number, barely visible through the smoke, is the only identifier left. Above, Ghost's aircraft circles once, twice, waggling its wings in acknowledgement before turning east toward home. Rattler raises one hand in weary salute, then lets it drop. He's alive. Somehow, impossibly, he's alive. But he's also alone, injured, in the middle of the Libyan desert, with no water and no idea if rescue will come before the sun or the Germans find him. In the distance, he can still hear the battle. Explosions. The faint rattle of machine guns. The Stukas are still trying to reach their target, and the Desert Hawks are still fighting to stop them. Rattler drags himself to his feet, swaying, and looks up at the sky. Even now, even here, the war continues. Men are dying up there, on both sides, locked in a dance that only ends when someone falls. He thinks of Cowboy, of Ghost, of Kellerman. He thinks of the mechanics who kept his Warhawk flying against all odds. He thinks of the ground troops who depend on pilots they'll never meet to keep the Luftwaffe off their backs. And he thinks, they'd better win. They'd better make this worth it. The fire crackles behind him, thick black smoke rising into the perfect blue sky, a pillar marking the spot where another Desert Hawk fell. But the fight isn't over. It's never over. High above, barely visible against the glare of the merciless sun, the dogfight continues. The sun moves across the sky with agonizing slowness. Captain Jake Rattler Morrison sits in the shadow of his burning Warhawk, what's left of it, and tries to think clearly through the haze of pain and shock. His left shoulder is dislocated or broken, he can't tell which. His ribs scream with every breath, and the cuts from the shattered canopy have soaked his flight suit with blood. But he's conscious, and he's breathing, and in this war, that's more than many pilots can say. The battle is over. He can tell by the silence. No more engines, no more gunfire. Just the wind moving across the desert and the crackling of the fire consuming his aircraft. He doesn't know who won. He doesn't know how many made it home. He checks his survival kit, a canvas bag that somehow stayed attached during the crash. 1 canteen of water. Signal mirror. Flare gun with 2 rounds. Compass. First aid kit. A .45 pistol with 2 magazines. Survival rations that will last maybe 3 days if he stretches them. The desert stretches endlessly in all directions. No landmarks, no roads, just sand and rock and heat. He knows the general direction of Allied lines. East, maybe 60 miles. Might as well be 600. No one survives a desert walk in North Africa without water, and his single canteen won't last more than a day in this heat. His best chance is to stay near the crash site and wait for search and rescue. Ghost saw him go down. Ghost will report his position. They'll send someone. If they can spare anyone. If the squadron still exists. Hours pass. The sun climbs higher, and the temperature becomes inhuman. Rattler drags himself further from the wreckage, far enough that if the fuel tank cooks off again, he won't be caught in the blast, close enough that he can be spotted from the air. He uses a piece of wing panel to create a small patch of shade and huddles beneath it, rationing sips of water that seem to evaporate before they reach his stomach. He drifts in and out of consciousness, pain and heat blurring the boundaries of time. At one point, he thinks he hears engines and struggles upright, fumbling for the flare gun. But the sky is empty. Hallucination. Dehydration. Death approaching on soft feet. Then, late in the afternoon, the sound returns. But this time it's real. A single aircraft, low and fast, approaching from the east. Rattler's heart hammers as he raises the flare gun with his good arm and fires. The red star arcs into the sky, trailing smoke, and he watches it climb, praying the pilot sees it. The aircraft banks hard, AP-40 Warhawk, battered and scarred, but flying true. It circles once, twice, and Rattler sees the pilot lean out of the cockpit, searching. Then the aircraft waggle its wings. "I see you." The Warhawk makes another pass, and this time something drops from the fuselage, a canister trailing a small parachute. It hits the sand 30 yards away, and Rattler stumbles toward it, each step agony. Inside, water, medical supplies, and a handwritten note. "Hang tight. Rescue bird inbound. 30 minutes. Ghost." Rattler sinks to his knees, clutching the canister, and for the first time since the crash, he allows himself to believe he might survive this. The rescue comes in the form of a British Lysander, a high-winged reconnaissance aircraft that can land on a postage stamp and take off again before anyone notices. It bounces down onto the desert floor, the pilot barely stopping before Rattler is dragged aboard by the observer in the rear cockpit. They're airborne again within 90 seconds, the Lysander's radial engine roaring as they climb away from the crash site. Rattler looks back at the wreckage of his Warhawk, now just a black smudge on the endless tan canvas of the desert. Another aircraft lost. Another piece of metal and dreams scattered across North Africa. But he's alive. 3 days later, Rattler Morrison stands outside the medical tent at the forward airbase, his left arm in a sling, ribs wrapped tight with bandages. The doctors wanted to evacuate him to Cairo for proper treatment, but he refused. His squadron is here. His war is here.